I'm Brian Carter, the Syringe Endowed Professor and Department Chair of Humanities and Bioethics here at UMKC School of Medicine. And it's my pleasure to host Dr. Nancy Tilson-Mallett as our Noback-Burton Lecturer today. The Noback-Burton Lectureship, I should say, was endowed by Dr. Risco, who was a 1975 graduate of the school and is an emergency physician in southeast Missouri. I was awaiting his arrival, but haven't seen him yet. And the endowment was directed towards recognizing things that physicians do outside of medicine to make their life rich, enjoyable, and perhaps uplift themselves and others in arts, photography, poetry, literature. And last year, you may remember, we hosted Dr. Brad Warner, a pediatric surgeon who is also a graduate of this school and recipient of the Take Wing Award. He's a renowned pediatric surgeon at St. Louis Children's. About 2 weeks ago, we were informed he passed unexpectedly. So I made a note to his wife, Barbara, who is a division chief of neonatology at St. Louis Children's, that I would acknowledge that and share that information. The dean, who is not here today, asked that I do as well. Nancy comes to us from a fairly diverse path. It's not the traditional path. She graduated college at Washburn University in Topeka, went on to medical school at the University of Kansas, and she took her residency there and went to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, correct?
That's right.
And then she was on the faculty and staff of a number of hospitals across Missouri and east. And when she finally landed at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, she was an assistant professor in internal medicine and in palliative and hospice medicine. While she was here for about 10 years before retirement, she established a humanities course that was well regarded, and I'm going to acknowledge that I need somebody to teach the course again, so maybe I'll ask you to come back.
Yeah, you're paying me.
Medicine and the body image. But she engaged students in sculpting and artwork, and herself is an artist. And it is from that perspective that I've asked Nancy to present to us today. As an artist, she has been creative across many different media, and she's presented her works in many venues across Kansas City and St. Louis and local, if you will, venues, but also other places nationally. And Nancy is going to speak with us today about art and medicine, a physician's journey of seeing. Nancy, welcome.
Well, thank you, Dr. Carter. I'm very honored to give this lecture. You did your research. I'm so impressed, that I don't have to introduce myself. My first slide was going to be who am I, to give my credentials, but he did that beautifully. And I would tell my residents, medical students, and my patients, they say, what are your qualifications? I said, I have done everything an internist could do except work in a prison, and I'm not going to do that. But I've been on Indian reservations and community hospitals, rural hospitals, and I had a public health commitment where I was the doctor in Weeping Water, Nebraska. So I functioned as a family practitioner out there. It was fun. So I've done a variety. Let's see, where's the clicker here? And I was saying to the audience before, it's that when I was here, Nope, it went too far. Didn't want to go that far. Now, that the lecture hall would be full, and I could read the faces and interact and laugh and cry, and now everybody's on Zoom. I have no idea. So the few of you who are here, thank you for coming. I'm going to read your faces, okay? So now I'm leading the creative life. I've always had an interest in art, but of course, as a physician, my artwork was very limited. I would do it in bursts. I first started out in my 30s doing pastels because pastels were like crayons. You can color, put them down, answer the phone, take care of your kids, come back. So it was the best medium for me. My current project is based on patterns in nature. I'm fascinated with. This is at an art fair that I'd never been at an art fair before because it's too much work, but I decided to go to this one, and it's too much work. And it was a disaster. It was a thunderstorm, lightning, hail, and then the aftermath was heat and humidity. I only had about 6 people come to my booth and bought one item. So you always learn your lessons in life. Won't do that again. Okay. Disclosures, I don't have any outside support. I do have my art business that in addition to art, I give lectures and workshops. So what is my interest in art? I was born with it, that I was always fascinated with the world around me, especially of nature, of flowers and lizards and snakes and birds, and I wanted to express them and be able to draw and color and paint them. Every May Day, I would bring my mother the violets and the dandelions in the yard. And then in the summer, I'd bring her frogs and snakes, to her dismay. But I just loved their textures and their patterns. And of course, I had some natural ability. I'm definitely a visual learner. Auditory is really difficult for me, that I'm trying to learn to listen better and process that. And in med school, I excelled at all the visual things, histology, pathology, anything that required visual images. And I do have my embryology notes from medical school that's archived at the Clendening Library at Kansas University Medical Center. I'm one of those rare that kept all my notes, and I donated them, and they were so excited that said, we haven't had any donations since 1908. So if you have any old lectures that the archives would like to see them. And I had hand-eye coordination. I love sports. I love hitting balls. And if any of you are tennis players or baseball players, you know that feel when you hit the sweet spot and it goes all the way up your fingers to your hippocampus. It feels so good. And in art, I love the painting where you paint with oils. It's that oil buttery texture, and with watercolors, it's a soft feel. I like that tactile stimulus. Then for my own mental health, the last 2 issues, it gave me a sense of accomplishment. So I did my residency in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and my husband at that time, who's over here in the corner, right, was interested in historic preservation, and this allowed him to pursue his life's dream. We bought a house in a neighborhood next to the Capitol, and our house was an 1884 federal row house that needed everything done. So, like the residents or medical students in the audience, that you probably some days come home exhausted, feel like you haven't helped anybody, that you're working with the most difficult patients that are non-compliant or difficult and even nasty. But when I would come home and I'd strip the wallpaper and strip the paint, and then later have the fulfillment of repainting and re-wallpapering it and seeing the end result, and sitting back and looking at it with my coffee or my wine, and saying, I've accomplished something. So it was great for my mental health. And self-care, that I use art therapy quite a bit. And in my art class, I teach a lot of lessons on stress management, visualization techniques, relaxation techniques that got me through all the stressful times. I burned out a lot and came back. Medicine is difficult, that you have to have an outlet, that music, everybody should exercise, everybody should meditate, but an outlet of singing, music, dancing, theater, do it and fully live. So as a teenager, I felt different. But don't all teenagers feel like they're different? Yeah, that continued. When I would take art classes, I would look at the composition the instructor had set up, and I would say, oh, look at that, that fits the golden ratio. Do you know about the Fibonacci sequence? And I'd get the look, you're weird. And then in medical school, I loved the slides, pathology, histology, and would see the iridescent colors and the patterns, and I would say this, oh, look at these colors and patterns, and I got the weird look. So I just stopped talking about it, except to my family and friends that knew I wasn't weird. Okay, this is what the lay people think about artists are. Artists are crazy, like Vincent van Gogh that cut off his ear. They're flaky, they're disorganized, and most of them are starving artists that can't make a living. Well, in my developmental years as teenager and college, I wanted to be known as a respected person. So I liked the characteristics of the physician: serious, hard-working, dedicated, smart, and I wanted to be financially secure. Art is iffy. It takes you about 10 years of hard work to finally self-support yourself, unless you're lucky. But there is a comparison of the successful artist, and I say successful, where they're making a living, to the scientist physician. Curious, creative, persistent, patient, objective observer, courageous, detail-oriented, communicative, and they're experts in time and project management. So they match. So finally in my 40s, I felt comfortable with myself being both right and left brain. And this is a simplification that, the hemispheres communicate with each other. But this was a very popular concept way back then. And this is me in my self-portrait in my 40s. Yes, I had wild and crazy hair. I kind of miss it, but I like my gray hair now. I have a gold streak down the middle of my face that was representational of my initial split, where I kept the two sides separate, and now I'm uniting them. Now I would like to talk about my art heroes. I have many others, but for the brevity of this lecture, I'll talk about my two favorite. Leonardo da Vinci. Anybody love Leonardo like I do? Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. He is the most curious, creative genius ever. And his entire life, he continued to have that curiosity of a 10-year-old. How do things work? Of a polymath. Figuring out how the tributaries and how water flows, and making war machines, and along with his art and theater props, that he studied everything: engineer, architecture, and I loved his notebooks, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Then Frank Netter. How many of you have his Atlas of Anatomy? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I have his whole series of anatomy books that I really enjoy them. So Leonardo, this is his famous Vitruvian Man, that he measured the proportions of the human body. He did a lot of autopsies that were illegal at that time, but he did mathematical ratios. For instance, I don't know if any of you know this, but the distance between your elbow and your wrist is the same as your foot. That he set the standard for anatomy of the human body. And I have a condensed book of his notebooks that are so enjoyable. And as many of you know, he wrote in mirror image. And I think it was so if anybody flipped through his notebooks, they couldn't read it. They'd have to take it up to a mirror and study it. One of my favorite entries is of a woodpecker head, and the note is, how does a woodpecker peck without blowing his brains out, basically? And it's, well, I've never thought about that before. But those are the kind of curiosity we have. And I also liked his artistic renderings. He would spill coffee or wine on his page and then say, oh, and would create artwork around that spill. It was, yeah. Now, I'd like for you to look at the image on the left of the head and neck. It's scaffolding. This is a sign of a genius that he made a mistake. He looked at the architecture of the neck holding the head like an engineer. That how the heck can you hold up an 8-pound head on this little neck? So he made scaffolding to hold up the neck instead of objectively observing the tendons. So the lesson to me, even a genius who observes carefully can make a mistake. There have been a lot of books written about him on how to be a genius, steps to genius every day, and I've read this book. The basic principle is stay curious, keep a 10-year-old mind, question everything, and be curious and creative. I've also pondered through the years what's nature versus nurture of creativity and talent of art, music, theater, etc. And yes, people are born with natural talent, but the ones that have a passion of fulfilling that dream, fulfilling being a visual artist, a musician, or an actor, they're passionate about it and work at it, they'll make it. So Frank Netter, is a general surgeon that became a master medical illustrator. This is back in the 50s, the old-fashioned way. He used illustration board where he sketched out his ideas, painted in gouache, which is a water medium, or ink. That I really admired that. And his images are so fantastic. And I especially like how he applies humanism to his images. That if any of you have seen the cardiology atlas, he has the image of a man having a heart attack, holding the classic fist over his chest, leaning over with the Widowmaker image of the anterior descending artery being clogged. In my mid-30s, I was about 35, I thought about being a medical illustrator, so inspired by him. And I was accepted at the Kansas City Art Institute as a junior. And it was enlightening. I realized at that time, medical illustration, all illustration was going to the computer, graphic arts. And if any of you played with the mouse trying to make vectors and the Adobe of doing the different, it was so frustrating, it wasn't fun. So I decided, no, I'm just going to be a fine artist and do what I want to do. Graphic arts, not for me. And you may be aware of John Kabat-Zinn, his study in mindfulness and meditation. He is a professor at medicine at the University of Massachusetts in Worcester. When we lived in Massachusetts, I had to learn the pronunciation of these towns because it's spelled Worcester. And I asked the people, when do you pronounce the ham in Eastham and Chatham? And rarely do you pronounce the H's in those towns. So I learned the dialect. But he studied the effects of meditation and mindfulness on various health issues, especially for stress management of the medical students and the residents, and for cardiology clinics, and proved that this definitely helped their cardiac, mental health, everything. So what is mindfulness? So it's basically that you do moment-to-moment focusing and be absolutely aware of what's around you, including all of your senses, the air, your smell, noise, and being hyper-sensitive to all that. That I've tried to live my life that way, and sometimes I zone out, and I like zoning out. It's fun to zone out too. That I try to take mindfulness walks in nature, and springtime is the best time. That seeing even day to day, there are new blooms, and the colors change, and be able just to stop and look. And now it's the dogwood trees and the tulips that are in full bloom. And I try to make a mental image of that to carry with me throughout the day. So investigate mindfulness and meditation and stress management. Okay, now I'll get into my art. So as you can tell, my art forms are eclectic. When I first started out in my 40s, I thought, I'm going to make money on my art. And all the art business books said, you got to have a niche. You got to do one thing. And I believed it. And actually, I got started out in silk painting, which I really loved. I did silk paintings of microscopic images and sold scarves and ties. It was very popular. But I did silk painting because the paint was iridescent, like you would see under the microscope. I love painting representational landscapes, and I'll do those in pastel, now in oil, and in acrylic. And my current project, again, is Patterns in Nature. That the above you saw in my booth, that's an eye of a gecko. And I do have a pointer. Then there's the, do you have a pointer? At the, okay. I still don't see it. Well, so,
You can use the mouse on it.
okay, oh, there it is, yay! Did it. So this one is a textiles, a complex cloth. After my passion with silk painting, I started studying textiles further and met Jane Dunwall, who is an incredible master textile artist. And I studied with her for 3 years in San Antonio, where I would do projects, go to her a week, finishing my homework. And I learned everything about textiles. It was incredible. And she gave me a little certificate of master's in textiles. And this isn't academic, it's just I took her class. Then the other patterns in nature is diatoms, that the microscopic images of the ocean, and I'll talk about them in detail later. This is my art studio, finally completed in February. Been working on it for a year. My son-in-law is a contractor, and he finally finished it with his crew this February. So this is my dream. That, let's see if this pointer works. That part of the area on your, I don't know if it's your left or your right, that with the tablecloth is my flat table where I work in textiles. Right now I'm working on what's called Wild Things that I'll show you. I have a little kitchenette that's with a sink for all my textiles, and the coffee pot and microwave. Then the middle pictures is the middle area that's vaulted ceiling, that I have a painting area that's facing north, and west facing is my music area where I have my guitar and keyboard. And an area that I don't show is my grandson's area of crafts. That's a total mess, where they can come in and they create a lot of crazy stuff, because I have a lot of crazy stuff around the house. Oops, wrong clicker. Why isn't it advancing?
Use the mouse and click on next. Top of the column.
Come on.
Use the other button on the mouse.
There's another button? Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Right button.
Okay, technical. So this is a big project I performed 2 years ago as a vision quest, a physician's journey of seeing. I have advanced glaucoma, no peripheral vision. I have dim vision that I've adapted to. And there is an organization in Wichita called Envision that help the visually impaired and the blind. And one of their outreach programs is having a gallery. And I was there for 3 months showing my art that was based on the studies of my optic nerve and retina. And I also gave a 2-hour workshop to the employees of how I've adapted as a physician and artist to my visual impairment. Now, this is the actual technical studies. So try to imprint this on your brain, because all my artwork is based on this. This is the retinal nerve fiber layer, optical coherence tomography, and optic cube study. This is of my actual eye. The other technology is the Heidelberg retinal tomography, which is a laser technology that uses 3D photographs of the optic nerve and surrounding retina. So this is my interpretation of the RNFL layer. This is a silk painting that I was inspired to use like a Japanese brush strokes to represent the retina. This is about 22 by 22 inches. The Heidelberg had a more rustic feel that was, orange, it was textured. So I used raw silk that has a rough texture, dyed it yellow then orange to give it some variety of color. Then I used a felting technique where I took wool. Felting is where you have these needles and you punch it into the cloth below. And I actually have a machine that does that. I pounded it into it. So it gives it a 3D look. And to further enhance the rusticness, I embroidered it to burlap. So you can see on the right-hand side, the circle that, also I call it a Zen circle, the actual embroidery. And these are the other images that I did felting onto black canvas. Again, just making it that textural and three-dimensional feel. This I consider my masterpieces. These are large, 44 inches by 44 inches. It's based on the microscopic image of a mouse retina that I downloaded it from the internet and realized it was a pie shape. So I have a design board in my hallway that I put up when I made my son's quilt that was 6 foot long. Is he still here? Yeah. So I kept it up. Anyway, I had the design board, and I said, oh, wow, this will make a circle, a mandala. So I designed it, and then I stitched it together, adhered it to canvas. It was a lot of work. Then I embellished it with a sequins. So these are gorgeous. If anybody wants to buy them, let me know. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm supposed to say that, though, am I? Another part of the display is playful. I made iris flags. So I downloaded various colors of irises from the internet onto organza. Organza is a see-through stiff material. And then I adhered it to scraps of old silk paintings that I had, and then quilted it. On the back side of the iris flags are eye sayings that I've kept over the years, such as, keep your eye on the ball, she's the apple of my eye, etc. So each of them have a saying. Now the middle image is different. It's the microscopic illustration of the retina of the human eye. And this is actually from Netters. I made a silk screen of the Netter illustration and quilted it and made it into a flag. And I do have several scarves that are of the retina. Diatoms. Why do I like diatoms? Most of you have had basic biology and science, and maybe you've heard of these. They are crazy microscopic organisms in water related to algae. There are thousands of them. We lived on Cape Cod in Falmouth near Woods Hole, and we loved the Woods Hole community, and we'd go to the Oceanographic Institute. There's like 5 of them there that to the various lectures, and I was introduced to diatoms. So I had to buy Ernst von Haeckel's illustrated diatoms. It's beautiful, and I based my images on his illustrations. Then for this art show of diatoms, I have 2 different styles. One is of complex cloth textiles, and the other is of acrylic paintings where I made the creature into mandalas. This is complex cloth that I took diamond-shaped felt cloth, adhered it to the background, and stitched it. You can see the machine stitching, embellished it with actual needles and beads. And I love the three-dimensionality. And this organism has these crazy needle-like things coming out of it. Now, and I always think, who's the creator that created these things and why? I just think of a playful universal force. Oh, let's do it this way. Then I have 2 diatoms that look like crocheted, look like my grandma made them. And I said, this has got to be crocheted. So I crocheted the image and felted it onto a background of marbled silk. And this is another one that was a crocheted image. Aren't they crazy? Now this is starting with my mandalas, that this is based on a sponge form that's circular. I created a a painting on acrylic, so it's multimedia, that I entitled Interconnections, of how we are so interconnected in our universe to each other, to nature. And this was accepted into a jury show, and we're having a reception tomorrow night at the Interurban Art House. It's in Overland Park, 5 to 7, and this will be on exhibit for the next month at that facility. The other art piece of the same sponge, I said, I've got to do a Matisse flower image. So this is in honor of Matisse. So these are the acrylic paintings on, this is where I need to, the blue image is the illustration, the actual illustration of the actual organism. The orange figure is my interpretation on as a mandala. This is the opposite. The kind of orange-brown is the actual illustration, and the blue-yellow is my interpretation. The orange-brown is the actual organism, and on the right with the blue-purple is my interpretation. This one looks like bells and you know, spears. On your right is the organism, and on the left is my interpretation. Now, moving on to my next project, the Patterns in Nature, that was exhibited at Community Christian Church this summer, and this is my invitation. The upper painting is of turtle shells. I was fascinated with turtle shells around the world. You wouldn't believe the patterns they have. I had to make them. And since I have 4 grandchildren, 3 boys, 9, 8, and 5, who love to play Army, and I thought about turtle shell shields that they could play with. And then the animal eyes that I'm fascinated with, just a focus of right at the animal eye, of the scales and all the texture around the eye and the iris itself. So this is a show, and on the wall you'll see all the eyes looking at you. And there's my hubby, that I did have these going up the hallway of our next 1884 house is in Central Hyde Park. And it's a New Jersey beach house, only one like it in Kansas City. So it's going up this historic hallway, and he goes, you know, I feel like they're watching me. Can you take those down? And I said, that's the purpose of it, is we're being watched. The climate change, that we're destroying our earth, and we're the only, we can help them. Who's going to survive the next 100 years? Are we going to survive? And that's the whole reason behind the images. Plus, I love animals. I love animals. This is my grandson sitting on his lap. I had a color station where I had a black and white image of a turtle shell, and they could create their own turtle shell images. Very fun. For years, I've been fascinated with sycamore bark. I don't know how many of you walk on your nature walks and see the crazy shapes of sycamore bark. Then after a growth period or after a storm, they fall to the ground, and I've been collecting these. So this is the raw materials, the 4, that totally different color and shapes. And the green is the acrylic painting of one of the sycamore bark images that I turned into a happy forest mammal. So when I look at the bark, it talks to me. I said, what do you want to be? And I asked my grandsons too, what do you think this is? It's a snake, it's a fish, it's a turtle. It's, so I said, well, I think it's, so we argue back and forth as to what it should be, and use our imagination. So these are rather large pieces that I called my firebirds. And again, I thought of the creators of the diatoms, that, oh, it's so much fun to sit back and create anything you want and use your total imagination. Now, this is a series, Wild Things. I now have about 40 of these. See which one's a mammal, which one's a fish, and which one's, who knows? So the middle one's definitely a fish, and actually the one with the lips is a mammal, but it could be a bird. The last one, I don't know what it is. And here's some more that are in my purple-pink spectrum. The middle one is, I call the happy baby whale. So cute. These would make good Christmas ornaments, too. Lastly, I would like to talk about my landscapes, which I am passionate about. and I'm very passionate about northern New Mexico. That's where my soul lives. Excuse me, I need to take a drink. I was honored to be selected to be an artist in residence in September 2021 with 7 other fellow artists. We had a cute little cabins and a studio that was totally equipped. It was incredible. So in the day, we would go out on site, paint all day, come back to our studios. We had communal meals, and we had campfires at night where we'd tell jokes and stories and howl at the moon, stirring up the coyotes in the distance. So these are pastel paintings of Ghost Ranch, and I mainly did pastel because they're easy to carry on the plane. You know, wet oils are really hard to transport on the plane. The other artist drove and could do the oil painting. Pastels are versatile that way. If you know Georgia O'Keeffe, you'll recognize these images, the painted desert and at Pedernal. And I had a great insight during this retreat that, well, basically I can no longer do on plein air. I loved it because I love to be on site and you feel the wind and you smell the sage and the junipers and hear the birds and the crickets. But because of my glaucoma, the changing light just would wash things out, and I really couldn't paint on site. But what I would do is take the image that I can instill it in my brain, and I would do a value sketch. A value sketch is really critical for accurate representational painting, and it's basically the grayscale of white being 0 and black being 10. Then I'd go back to my studio where I had perfect lighting. That you may know that there's perfect lighting that simulates daylight, and it's what I have in my studio, and I had in this art studio, and so I could see and be accurate. So I opened up my iPad to the photograph, and it was dull. I thought, what the heck? I was standing there. I took this picture, and what I realized when you first see something that is spectacular and new to you, you see it like a 10-year-old, and you see it in those vivid colors. I mean, they were purple and yellow and orange. I mean, they were vivid. But then you take it back to your studio and the photograph, and your brain says, oh, it can't be that way, and it dulls it down. So I learned to imprint my initial image on my brain and remember those colors and paint it like that child had seen it. The sunsets at Ghost Ranch are spectacular, reflecting the mesas that are yellow and orange, and it's gorgeous. So this is sunset over Pedernal. Again, Georgia O'Keeffe painted repeatedly. On the other side, you'll see this cabin. This is City Slickers' cabin. I don't know if any of you saw the movie, I think in the 1980s, of City Slickers. Now, Hollywood does a lot of westerns on Ghost Ranch land. It's spectacular. And the Ghost Ranch decided to keep this cabin because it really fit into their environment. And they recently restored it it just fits. And in the background is Orphan Mesa and one of the spectacular sunsets. When you're in northern New Mexico, you can't help but feel the universal presence, the vast sky and the landscape, that there's something there. What is it? So it tends to attract spiritual retreats and, soul searching. There's a monastery in the desert that's just up the road from Ghost Ranch of Benedictine monks. They have lay retreats for the silent retreats where you can go and be in silence and walk around the grounds. And the grounds, they have the Stations of the Cross. And this is an image of one of the Stations of the Cross. And I love being able to see through the cross to the buttes beyond. On the other side is the Agape Center at Ghost Ranch. Ghost Ranch is owned by the Presbyterian Church, and this is their worship center, and they hold other things there. Now, Ghost Ranch It's, although it's by the Presbyterian Church, it's ecumenical. July is always art month, and this is where I learned to paint. I took a week retreat in pastel, a week in acrylics, a week in oil, a week in en plein air, and that's where I got skilled at my art. And of course, I love the plants. The cactus are so weird that compared to our Midwestern life. And I wish I have a painting of a purple cactus, and now I'm working on a pink cactus that is really bizarre, but they're fun. These are 2 oil paintings that I finished at home. One is as you walk up Box Canyon, you can go up to the Rocky Mountain hike. It's a beautiful walk with a little stream. It's gorgeous. The other is the Chama River, right at the bend, is very scenic. And this reflection, it really was the purples and yellows that I saw, and the reflection of the flowers. This always takes me back and makes me happy. So I talked about my silk paintings. I donated my silk paintings to Truman Medical Center, and they were along the hallway, pathology and lab, but they remodeled, and they've been taken down, and I don't know where they are. And I asked Faith Hensley, who's in charge of it, and she lives in Taos now and comes back as a consultant, and she said she's coming back in May and said, I'll try to find them. If anybody knows where these are, please let me know, because they really, art needs to be shown. I don't want them in a closet. So, the top image is gastric mucosa. I had to paint that in hot colors that reflect the acid. Then I embroidered Helicobacter pylori in the center of this. And I had this on exhibit, and a Hispanic man came up and said, you just need to add jalapenos. And the bottom painting, you can tell, is of a slide of a testicle with spermagenesis and the Leydig cells. It's my favorite histological slide. It's incredible. Okay. I have so much else to say, but I wanted to be succinct. So any questions for me?
Yes, questions. Have you looked at fractals?
Excuse me?
Fractals?
Yes. Fractals are incredible. I have a lecture on that.
Oh, wow.
I have a
Let me
lecture
know.
on-
I want to hear that one too.
Yeah, I have a lecture on science and art intertwined, where I get into the Fibonacci sequences, hexagons, fractals are crazy. Yes.
When can we find out where that lecture's going to be?
I'm sorry, I developed.
When is that lecture going to be?
I've got it. If you want it, I've got it.
I got my, I vote.
We might integrate that into medicine and art electives.
Yeah.
Not one day, we'll advertise.
That would be a good idea because, I mean, this is explosive. Fractals are explosive.
Yeah, because the lecture, I gave it on Bill Ritter's series of, that was a lecture I presented a couple of years ago for him. Because I wanted to show the significance of science intertwined with art. And my main purpose of art and medicine was how to observe keenly, and I've been an objective observer, while learning lessons of life as well. But people just go around their life, you don't really see, you don't know what's around them. And one of my favorite lectures was on evidence-based design of healing environments, of studying hospitals and oncology centers, of color, light, pictures. And I had the students divided into groups where they took each floor of the hospital. And it was like they came and said, wow, the artwork is fabulous. They hadn't paid attention to the art. And the art is fabulous at the hospital. And I used it for, wayfinding. Said, oh, picture of the Black Jesus is on this floor. Turn that way, the giraffe. So that was one of the most enlightening, I think, lectures that I gave to the students.
Can you say something about the connection of art and architecture in healing spaces?
Yes, well, it's more of a color, the psychology of color. We study that too. And in my 20s, I realized I was really sensitive to the colors, and this is a bad color. This is terrible. And it would make me sick. And I finally figured it out. It was, especially when I started studying the psychology of color, of what colors make you feel good, and what make you feel relaxed, what makes you feel alive, what makes you feel calm. There's a whole, science behind that. So hospital rooms, usually it's a light green, reflecting nature, or a light blue. You want to avoid yellow because it makes them look jaundiced. And this gray, which is popular everywhere, is sickening. So color theory and the importance of light, of seeing, having a window out to nature, not a window that looks onto cement wall. Nature is really critical to healing. Minimizing sound is important. What else can I say about that?
Can there be healing sound? I mean, Trent, don't you teach medicine and music?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's right. My son is here as a musician, Alex. That we talk about that a lot, of music and healing. And I love the study in the ICU where they had a beat at 60 beats per minute, and all the monitors in the ICU got to that 60 beats. And I really believe in music as well as visual art for pain management is distraction therapy that focus on something besides your pain. So I think it's essential for pain management as well as for healing. So I'm glad you're still teaching that. Fantastic.
Well, I had a question about your course that you were teaching, the art and medicine, because I've gotten to see a lot of the pieces of artwork that the students do. I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about some of the projects that you had them do in that class.
Oh, yeah, and I've got a whole PowerPoint presentation on that. We did everything, starting out with a gesture drawing, contour drawing, that the first day I'd have them draw each other's ear. As the ear's crazy. If you look at each other, it's all these contours, and nobody pays attention to ears. These are vestigial. Why do we have these ugly things anyway? So and they would get the giggling, and then I had them do sculptures, did self-portraits. We did color theory. I think one of the best projects I had was a month-long project where I had them work in groups of 4 to 5. I had a list of artists that had some sort of impairment, mentally or physically, and the assignment was to, I gave them a wig head, a styrofoam wig head, to design their personality and reflect their illness and the way that they painted their artwork. Oh my goodness, that these guys looked like they were senior art students, that what they came up with. One was Frida Kahlo, that's my favorite artist, looked just like her, and I have it in my art studio. That does, it's so good, and I have it, under glass. And I think it was amazing that each lesson I taught them drawing, taught them how to mix colors, how to paint with acrylics, and how to embellish. And by the 4th week, they had all those things together to come up with these masterworks. My other very fun project, humor in medicine, where we read Molière's, books that about doctors and the misery, and I had to make puppets of the characters. That they first worked in groups, and they drew out their character and what it would look like, and then I surprised them with what the puppet was going to be made of. It was a speculum. So, and they would always die laughing. I wanted that to be a surprise element. The speculum that they embellished with Google eyes and cloth and paint, and then I had them try to read the play with the speculum, and they couldn't do it. It was just, I've got videos of them just laughing. That every other minute was just laughing with this. Probably not politically correct to use a speculum. It was fun.
So you're tapping into the creative side of medical school.
And the importance of thinking outside the box, that a lot of our education is rigid, memorize. And I'm so glad that now we have assistance with AI and Google, where I don't feel the responsibility of memorizing everything like I did in 1970s. But you still have to memorize a lot. and the protocols, ACLS and CPR. But medicine's ambiguous. That an individual person has their own social economic background that's so different from you, and how to communicate with that person and hear them. You have to think outside the box, and you have to be inventive. That was one of my other favorite lessons was on communication. That I took the landscape. I told them to bring in a photo of a landscape, and they worked in pairs, and one would describe the landscape to the other one, hiding it from him, like there's a mountain in the background and blah, 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 and then see how they communicated it. And most people couldn't express the actual photograph, and that was very fun. And my first lecture that was called the Beta Project, I love the Southwest, so I was doing landscapes, and I told them, okay, now draw a mesa, and in front of that mesa is an adobe house, and next to that is a pair of cactus, and I'm seeing all these stairs. And I said, oh, who's been to the desert? Nada. I said, oh gosh, this is the vocabulary that they don't even know. And I noticed most of them were looking on their phones to look at the images. So that's a fun exercise.
Other questions or comments? Please.
I'm interested in your transition from a physician to an artist. It's kind of something that I've been grappling with for a while.
Okay.
I dabble in printmaking, and I've been recently encouraged to show.
Good.
I have hesitancy from that, exposing myself to that kind of vulnerability. How did you get over that? And what did you get from the art community that was worth it? And
the art community is so genuine and forgiving and encouraging.
Well, my second question was, my worry is that you'll be seen as a doctor who creates art. Or were you welcomed into the artist community?
I was welcomed, and it was like, oh gosh, a doctor that paints. Because doctors' hobbies are golf and a lot of musicians, but it's rare to be an artist. So it's very unusual. And the art that, there's echelons of the art world. There's the high end. I'm not going to get to that high end. They're snobs. Oh my goodness, and judgmental and blah, blah, blah. But in the other levels, people want you to succeed, and they're curious about what are you expressing and how did you do that? And it's very, very receptive. And I can talk to you about if you want to enter some shows. And you'll have to integrate yourself, that you're not a crazy artist, that artists and physicians have the same characteristics.
Any comments on visual thinking strategy?
Yes, in most medical schools, if they have an art and medicine program, it's on visual thinking strategies. And this is where you look at a painting in a group, and people will describe, what do you see? What makes you say that? Is there anything more? And it's very interesting how a group will come up with modern art and Picasso of different things that each person sees. And it teaches ambiguity as well. It teaches a lot of things, of observation, that one person will see something the other person won't, the importance of team playing. Again, one person sees something the other one doesn't. So it is valuable.
We try to incorporate that in a program called Art for Medicine that we partner with the Kemper to teach.
Yeah, I was a docent at the Kemper, and I kept saying, hey, I'm here. And I think I'm too much of a personality. What can I say?
Well, Nancy, we appreciate your personality. Thank you so much. In honor of our first dean, Dean Richardson Noback, who is 101 years old.
And our first graduate, Dr. Burton. And any questions from those online? Should have asked earlier.
Yeah, I forget about the Zoomies.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your presence today. There's some hors d'oeuvres outside. Stand around and chat. Nancy has a personality. It's engaging. She'd be happy to speak with you.
Hi, good to see you.
Really. So much of what you put in.
Hey, how's it going? Good, how are you?